Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. So this week on the podcast, I want to dive in a little bit about hormones, what they are, why they are important, and why we should really stop dreading for them to disappear, because they play a huge role in our health, wellness, and maintenance of health as we age. So before we dive in, hormones. Women, we have like a cocktail of hormones happening with us. We're not as simple as men in the fact that they just have testosterone and it rinses and repeats every 25 or 24 hours. For us ladies, we have a lot more going on, which means that we are dynamic. We are dynamic creatures with lots to offer. And I think when we tap into understanding these different hormones and their benefits, there actually is this urgency or this urge to try to balance them, to try to create health and wellness and vitality in these different hormone areas, because they play a huge role in how we feel physically, how we feel emotionally, our mental states, and how we really do move through those transitions of perimenopause and of postnatal care and through postmenopause, and how we can really thrive in our life. I think sometimes it's hard to get on board of really appreciating something that's happening in our body when we're not really taught all the magic, all the wisdom behind it. So as we dive in, I want to go a little bit into these hormones and what they are. And I'm using the book, The Female Brain by Luann Brezendine. She's a doctor. And this book, I think it was wrote early 2000s, like 2003. But I love it. It's one of my favorite books out there if you're interested in hormones, the female brain, and what is exactly going on with like deep within our body with this endocrine system and with our womb space. Not so much symbolically, like this is really looking at how the brain interacts with our endocrine glands and produces these hormones. But anyways, enough about that. In her book, right in the beginning, she calls it the cast of the neurohormone characters. And I think this is so beautiful because it really does describe how hormones affect the woman's brain. And so I'm going to read directly from her book. These are not my words, these are her words, and I just think they are fantastic. So she goes on to saying, these are the hormones that most likely your doctor knows about and is probably mentioned to you. Estrogen, the queen, powerful, in control, all-consuming, sometimes all business, sometimes an aggressive seductress, friend of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and other feel-good brain chemicals. Then we have progesterone, which lots of us know about, which is in the background, but a powerful sister to estrogen. Intermittently appears and sometimes is a storm of cloud reversing the effects of estrogen, sometimes is a mellowing agent, and she's really the mother of those kind of chill pill brain volume neurotransmitters that we have. And then there's testosterone. Yes, ladies, we have testosterone in our body. Testosterone is that fast, assertive, focused, all-consuming, masculine, forceful seducer, aggressive, unfeeling, has no time for cuddling kind of hormone. And then she goes on to talk about the other ones that your doctor might not be mentioning to you. Some of them are neurotransmitters that affect us or work as a hormone as well, or interact with our hormones. So the first one she goes into talking about is oxytocin. Most of us ladies know about oxytocin because of having children, because of breastfeeding, labor, so forth. But she goes on to saying that oxytocin is like the fluffy, purring kitty, cuddly, nurturing Mother Earth The good witch Glinda in The Wizard of Oz finds pleasure in helping and serving. She is the sister to those male socializing hormones in our body. She's the sister to estrogen, the friend to dopamine, which is linked to a feel-good chemical that happens in our body. And then she mentions cortisol. Cortisol is the frazzled, stressed out, highly sensitive, physical and emotionally, which I think a lot of us as burned out women can really relate to. And then she goes to talk on a few more that we really don't hear a lot about. And I'm going to do my best to pronounce these correctly because I'm not good with pronouncing medical terms sometimes. But the first one is vasopressin. Secretive, in the background, subtle aggressive male energy, brother testosterone, brother to oxytocin, and it really wants us to connect in kind of that male active way. Then we have DHEA, which is a reservoir of all the hormones. It's omnipresent, pervasive, sustaining mist of life, energizing, father and mother of testosterone and estrogen, nicknamed the mother hormone. It's the Zeus and Hera of hormones. It's robust, present in youth, and wanes to nothing in our older age. Then we have our androstenedione, the mother of testosterone in the ovaries. It supplies the sassiness, the high-spirited in our youth. It wanes at menopause and dies with our ovaries. And then we have allopregnanolone. This is the luscious, soothing, mellow daughter of the progesterone. Without her, we are crabby. She is sedating, calming, easing, neutralizes any stress. But as soon as she leaves, all is irritable withdrawal. Her sudden departure is the central story of PMS, the 3 or 4 days before our women's period starts. Now, another one that Luann does not mention in here, but I just want to quickly talk about too, is serotonin. So the cool thing about serotonin is she's kind of like that damsel in distress. She is considered a neurotransmitter, but she functions as a hormone. And so her job is really to help regulate happiness, anxiety, mood, social behavior, appetite, digestion, sleep, memory, and sexual desire. So as you can see just from this short list, and there are more out there as well, is that this is just starting to show us how complicated our hormonal system is. But the beautiful thing is that we don't have to worry about how it all works. What we just need to know is where it's present in our body and why it's important, and why cycle syncing our life, or really starting to live in a cyclical way, can support and balance these hormones. So when we look at the first half of our cycle, so after our bleed days, when our bleed's starting to come to that end, maybe we're just lightly spotting, this is the sign that estrogen is starting to pick up in the body. So now estrogen, like we've talked about, she kind of is like that star of the show. She kind of brings things back online after we've just created like this big release during our period. Her interest is really about thickening that uterine lining. She really is important because she improves the quality of our skin. She preserves our bone strength. She regulates our cortisol production. She helps with sexual development. She helps with hair growth, body temperature, and she helps to protect us from dementia in our older years. She also enhances endorphins in our body, so those feel-good chemicals in the brain. And she also increases that serotonin. So serotonin, that happiness hormone or that happiness neurotransmitter, and estrogen are closely related. So what this tells me right off the get-go is when we look at estrogen, she is that hormone that really makes us feel excitable. She primes our brain for language. She helps our memory. Like, she really is important. And when we think as we get older of being forgetful, or these conditions that affect the mind, or when we think of, and we'll talk a little bit more of this a little bit in a bit here about depression and so forth, is that we really want to keep that mind primed, right? So we want these hormones to be marinating in the body. We want the brain and the pituitary gland and the ovaries and the adrenals all to be working together to communicate so that we are creating optimal levels of it. Now, the other big hormone in the second half of our cycle is our FSH. Now, if you are on the fertility journey, you've probably heard a lot about FSH because this is really telling you how, what kind of quality your follicles are, and are they ready to be mature enough to be released into that egg. Like our FSH really does help us when it comes to having that regular cycle. So when we're younger, our FSH is lower, which means that we have longer follicular phases. But as we get older, our FSH rises, which gives us those shorter cycles. So something to think about is that, we have estrogen that's working on the lining here, but that FSH that's being released, it stands for follicle stimulating hormone, is that it's interacting with those reserves of eggs that you have stored in your ovaries, saying, okay, are we ready to produce another cycle, right? And so we kind of want that FSH to be at a really healthy level and to be balanced in the body if we're hoping for regular cycles. And then we have testosterone in the first half of our cycle. This kind of peaks closer to that ovulation time. It's in the later part of our follicular phase. And testosterone, I think sometimes we don't think a lot about. We associate with the male, maybe we associate with aggressiveness, but this also is that part of us that really encourages us to take those risks and to go outside our comfort zone. I really think it's a beautiful part of my experience in ovulation, of not being afraid to be visible, to be seen, to be known to the world. And so this can be a really important for us to allow us to take those risks and to really challenge our level of comfort, or you can even say calculated risks, right? So it can make us more impulsive, more daring, more competitive. It increases our libido, and it also peaks kind of around that ovulation time. But what it's really important for is it's important for our bone density and our muscle mass. It's important for our cognitive function, our mood, our sexual function, and our energy. So testosterone really, combined with that estrogen, helps with growth and maintenance and repair of our reproductive tissues, of our bones, and of our muscle mass. So I know that for myself, when I was going through a hormone imbalance, testosterone was one of the ones I was really concerned about in my body, because I could feel it. I could feel that I didn't have that motivation. I was crashing early in the day. I wasn't able to get through the day without feeling like I was exhausted. I was losing lots of hair. Like there was a lot of these signs of just feeling like the slowness or this aging in my body, it felt like, in a way. And that was that testosterone. Now, serotonin, we also see her a lot in the first half of our cycle, which is that neurotransmitter that also acts like the hormone or functions like the hormone. And its job is to help regulate, like I said, happiness, anxiety, mood, our social behavior. It controls our appetite, our digestion, our memory. And it's located in the digestive system and in the central nervous system. And it's affected by our shifting levels of estrogen. So once again, estrogen's kind of that primer to help control these more minor roles or minor characters in the play in our body. And then we move into the second half. And as we transition to that second half, this is where you might hear the term LH, the luteinizing hormone, which is just kind of that hormone that helps to shift the body into releasing the egg. So that way we have an ovulation. And then from that ovulation, progesterone comes into the storm. So up until now, progesterone hasn't been presented in the first half of our cycle. Now, as progesterone, after that egg is released and progesterone comes into play, this is where we see testosterone drop right off again. It kind of peaks at ovulation and then it drops off. FSH, it drops off. Our estrogen, it doesn't completely drop off, but it drops to a pretty low baseline level. And then the progesterone takes over. Now, progesterone, A little bit is secreted from our ovaries to kind of initiate that ovulation or initiate that release. But once that egg is released, the shell around the egg, the corpus luteum, it is actually what produces all of our estrogen in our body for that second half of our cycle. So if we have a really healthy ovulation, if we've had all our hormones operating as we needed to, we're going to have this really stellar ovulation, which means that we're going to have a really stellar egg with a really healthy shell. And that shell is what's going to create the progesterone. And why this is important is because progesterone balances out our estrogen. So if we're experiencing estrogen dominance, we've got to ask ourselves, are we producing enough progesterone? They work together in creating that balanced system so that we really are harmonizing our hormones and creating balance. When we do this, those PMS symptoms, those painful periods, those menstrual diagnoses that we're facing of fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, all of those, they kind of get eliminated, right? And so when we have balanced hormones, we resolve all these things that have become considered normal as part of our cycle health. Painful periods, these diagnoses, they're not normal. They're common, but they're not normal. And so the more that we can balance and think about how can I really promote and strengthen one end of my cycle so that the other end can be equally strong and cared for, we really do create this balance. So like we said, progesterone's kind of like that queen of expression. She's kind of like the sister to estrogen. And she really peaks about those 5 days before your bleed. Now, progesterone, what's really important to know about is that it promotes optimal brain performance. It promotes and enhances sleep. It reduces our inflammation in our body. It helps also with the muscle building. It protects against heart disease. Progesterone increases our amygdala activity, which is that alert system in our brain. But the really cool thing is that even though it's increasing our sensitivity to being alert, it's also simultaneously sedating our system, almost the same effect that alcohol might calm that system as well, right? So it calms the nervous system to make it easier to deal with stress. So even though we're on high alert, it's also releasing these elements that really kind of like go, hey, yeah, there's lots of stuff to watch out for, but it's okay. We can chill out. We got this. And so this is where it's really beautiful. Now, one thing that's really kind of cool, and a lot of this is in the Female Brain book that I think is amazing because she did a lot of research around this, is that she talks about how females whose ovaries make the most estrogen and progesterone are more resistant to stress because they actually have more serotonin cells in their brain, where the women with the least amount of estrogen and progesterone are also more sensitive to stress and have fewer serotonin brain cells. And so this just goes to show that when we take care of our hormones, we really do create this ease and this health and this wellness in our body. So when we're looking at balancing our hormones, there's 110 million different ways to do the exact same thing. For some of us, it's going to feel really good to take supplements, and it's going to really feel good to eat a certain way. I truly believe that eating for our hormones, eating for a healthy cycle is powerful, powerful medicine. Like if you haven't listened to my interviews with Madeline McKinnon, go back and listen to those, because I think there is so much that we can get from proper nutrition and nutrition that supports certain things. Certain foods enhance the progesterone production. Certain foods help to enhance the estrogen. Certain foods help to detox high level of estrogen. Like we can use food as our main source of creating balance. But then where my work comes in and where I think it is so important, I feel that this is valuable and it's been a really good tool for me, is starting to know the presence of these hormones in my body. So that way, when I'm feeling not my normal self, or when I'm starting to get a painful period, or maybe breast tenderness kicks in, that all of a sudden I can say, okay, what's out of balance? What's going on here? And then I can look at it, and then I can ask myself, what can I do about it? Maybe that's a supplement. Maybe that is food. Maybe that is more rest. Maybe that's a better bedtime routine. Maybe that's better lifestyle habits, right? Like one that's really impacted me is the amount of stress eating I was doing after bedtime, right? So eating at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, not because I was hungry, but just because the house was finally quiet, right? And it's funny, I have this little device. It's called the Lumen device. I don't really follow their requirements or what they suggest for diet and everything. I'm not really into it for that. But what I really like using it for is to watch how my habits, such as sleep, such as how late I eat, such as where I'm at in my cycle, affect my body's ability to metabolize food. And this really doesn't, it measures how you metabolize food. So that's been kind of cool to see that during my menstruation, I can have the same habits I had at ovulation, but I only stay in carb burning mode in my metabolism during my menstruation, where every other part of my cycle, it's pretty easy for me to play with to get into the fat burning mode of my metabolism. And so it's really interesting to watch like how these things shift and change. But what I really love doing is starting to look at my behaviors, starting to look at what I need. I know that progesterone creates that sedativeness, but I also know that it creates that alert system in my body. So I try to do things that require me to be less stressed out. I perhaps don't go out into big box stores that I know stress me out. I don't have loud music pumping out in my car because sound stresses me out. I look for these little things and I start to shift my behaviors. And by doing that, I truly do believe that I'm supporting my hormones and supporting that, creating that balance, because I now know that the reason I'm feeling isn't just some incidental accident. Like it's not like, oh, you're tired today. Well, that's weird. We have no idea why. There's so many things that I can link in towards. I can go, okay, did I go to bed late? No. Okay, was it because it was a full moon? Yes. Is it because I was ovulating, or was I in my menstruation, right? Like these are the questions I can ask myself and I get the answers. And I think as women, sometimes we feel so lost in our health journey. We feel so lost in how can we actually create balance and wellness and ease, when the answer is by just connecting to our body and knowing our body. But to know our body, we need to understand our hormones. And to understand our hormones requires us to be present in our cycle, to quit wishing it away. And in fact, starting to go, okay, this season makes me feel this way. When I am in my luteal phase, these are the 110 things that I go through on a regular basis. When I'm in my follicular phase, it's quite common for me to feel this way and this way and this way. And when we start to know that, we start to know ourselves and what motivates us and what excites us and, what makes us feel sad or what makes us feel a little bit lethargic. And we can set proper boundaries and structures around that so that we are protecting and caring for ourselves. And the more that we balance our hormones, the more we have the opportunity to create longevity of having a cycle. I think so many of us wish for our cycle just to end and disappear. But realistically, if we can maintain a healthy cycle where we're having these circulating hormones present in our body at balanced levels for as long as possible, and putting off menopause, not to put off aging, but to create that longevity of these hormones, our whole wellness, our whole body benefits from it. Our bones benefit from it. Our digestive tract benefits from it. Our cholesterol, our heart, like all of these systems, our immune system, all benefit from us being able to feel the cyclical change between these hormones on a regular basis. And the more that we can do that, the more that we're going to gracefully and easily move into our older years and into menopause, with hopefully less resistance, with hopefully less a side effect. I just did a podcast episode on someone else's podcast this week, and she was telling me a lot of the research that she was looking into, especially in Indigenous communities across Canada and looking at Indigenous communities throughout the world. And a lot of them don't have the symptomology that we have for PMS and for menopause. And I'd like to believe, and she would like to believe, that this is because they're living cyclically, because they're honoring their rhythm, because they're supporting that hormone transfer that's happening all the time, and they're creating longevity in their hormones, which is then carrying them into health and wellness as they become seniors, as they go through these bigger transitions. So if you weren't familiar with your hormones, I hope that today's lesson or today's podcast kind of gives you a little insight and a little appreciation that we actually don't want to wish these away. We actually want to wish them just to be balanced. I want my estrogen to be present. I want my FSH to be balanced. I want my progesterone. I want that egg to be super healthy, so that way my progesterone can be super healthy and it can balance out that estrogen that can sometimes become dominant in my body. And I know this, I can become estrogen dominant easily. And how I can have that testosterone, and how I can have lots of good serotonin cells, and I can create dopamine, and I can just start to feel happy and connected and balanced, which requires us to be these different versions of ourselves, these 4 different women that are experiencing 4 different spikes or fluctuations in hormones that require 4 different self-care techniques. So I hope you feel inspired to go a little bit deeper into your hormones and to start to explore what it means to live in balance as a woman. Friends, have you had a chance to download my new free ebook? Maybe it's not you. The Truth on PMS and How You Can Take Back Control of Your Cycle is now available. This is truly a book that I think needs to be in the hands of every woman who struggles with the second half of their menstrual cycle. So if this is you, click on the link in the show notes and download your free copy today. And remember to subscribe to this podcast and share a review if you loved this episode. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.